Hello everyone and welcome to Ecosistant. The new year has arrived and with it come several exciting developments that are highly relevant for online retailers. Updates on the PPWR, the suspension of the obligation to appoint an authorized representative, Textile EPR in Italy and Spain, Furniture EPR in Portugal, and the question whether the EPR number for packaging EPR in Italy must be submitted to Amazon by February or March. A lot is coming up in 2026. To ensure that you and your stores get off to a smooth start in the new year and that no surprises throw you off course, we have compiled all this important information for you. So buckle up and take a deep breath, because here we go. Let's start with the basics, the PPWR. Yes, this year it's already happening. For online retailers, 2026 is the year in which the PPWR moves from coming sometime in the future to a binding operational reality. Although the packaging and packaging waste regulation is already in force, the transitional period ends on 12th of August 2026, and from that point onward, it will apply directly in all EU member states. This means very concretely, from that date, PPWR compliance is no longer voluntary preparation, but a prerequisite for continuing to place packaging and packaged goods on the EU market in a legally compliant way. And that is exactly when many retailers will, for the first time, have to deliver in very concrete terms, organizationally, legally, and operationally. So let's take a look at what will happen in 2026, why it matters, and what you as online retailers should be preparing for. The central date you need to remember is August 12, 2026. On this day, the transitional period ends and the PPWR becomes binding and directly applicable in all EU member states. From this date onwards, the PPWR is no longer a regulation that still needs to be implemented, but law that applies directly. This means that packaging placed on the EU market from that point must comply with the requirements of the PPWR. And this affects online retailers very directly, especially if you use shipping packaging, have your own branded packaging, or sell cross-border. Declaration of conformity and technical documentation. One of the most central points from August 2026 onward is the declaration of conformity for packaging. If you, as a retailer, are considered a so-called producer, meaning you place packaging on the market under your name or brand, such as branded shipping boxes or private label packaging, then you must ensure that a PPWR declaration of conformity exists. This also includes technical documentation demonstrating that the packaging meets the relevant requirements, for example, with regard to material composition or recyclability. Important note, you can create this documentation yourself or obtain it from your packaging supplier, but ultimately the responsibility lies with you. That is why 2026 is the year in which you should clarify who provides me with this data, is it complete, and do I have it available if needed. EPR and authorized representatives in cross-border sales. Another major topic for 2026 is extended producer responsibility, or EPR. Many online retailers today sell into multiple EU countries without having a local establishment there, and this is where the PPWR becomes particularly relevant. From 2026 onwards, in such cases, you will have to appoint an EPR, authorized representative, in the destination countries. This is a local representative who takes on certain obligations, such as registration, reporting, and communication with authorities. In short, no authorized representative, no legally compliant placing of packaging on the market in that country. But be careful, this obligation is currently under political discussion and could be suspended in the future for EU-based companies. Why this matters and what the current status is will be explained in more detail shortly in this video. That's why 2026 is the right time to review your target markets and decide in which countries do I need an authorized representative and How do I set this up cleanly from an organizational perspective? You can find more information on the PPWR and authorized representatives in these videos. February 2026, clarity on registration and reporting. An important intermediate step will already occur by February 2026. By then, the European Commission will define how registration and reporting in national producer registers must be structured in detail. This is particularly relevant because the PPWR aims to further harmonize which data must be reported and how these reports are structured. For retailers, this means by 2026 at the latest, you should structure your packaging data in such a way that it can later be easily reported per country and per packaging type. There may be simplified procedures for smaller retailers, but the exact rules of the game will be defined in 2026. August 2026, standards for EU-wide labeling. Another milestone is also August 2026. By then, the EU will define binding standards for harmonized packaging labeling. This new labeling system will consist of easy-to-understand pictograms and, from 2028 onwards, will provide EU-wide clarity on recycling information. Why is this already important in 2026? Because by then you must know how your packaging will need to be designed in the future and how to prepare your design and approval processes accordingly. There is also an often underestimated aspect. The PPWR requires that certain packaging information be accessible before purchase. That means not only on the packaging itself, but also in the online shop, for example via product images, text or digital solutions such as QR codes. This too is something that should be prepared technically and organizationally in 2026. December 2026. Foundations for recycling and recycled content. By the end of 2026, more precisely by December 31st, further implementing rules will follow, including rules on recycling processes and the calculation of recycled content in plastic packaging. Even though mandatory recycled content quotas will only apply from 2030 onwards, the EU will already define in 2026 which processes are recognized and how evidence must be provided in the future. For retailers, this means if you use plastic packaging, 2026 is the right time to engage with suppliers and create transparency. Without reliable data, it will later become very difficult to meet the requirements. What 2026 means in practice. In summary, 2026 is not the year in which everything must already be implemented down to the last detail, but it is the year in which the foundations become binding. That means setting up EPR structures, appointing authorized representatives, clarifying conformity and documentation, preparing labeling and information obligations, and defining clear internal responsibilities. Those who do this properly in 2026 will avoid stress, costs, and sales interruptions in the years that follow. That was a lot of information on the PPWR, so let's briefly summarize. If you remember only 3 things, let them be these. First, 12th of August 2026 is the decisive deadline. From then on, the PPWR applies in a binding manner. Second, 2026 is the year of evidence and organization. Conformity, documentation, and EPR must be in place. And third, 2026 sets the rules that everything else will follow for labeling, reporting, and recycling. Those who prepare now will remain capable of acting in the future. At this point, we would also like to recommend our free white paper with all information related to the PPWR. Update on the obligation to appoint an authorized representative. From 2026 onwards, the focus is not only on PPWR implementation. Another important topic is the so-called authorized representative obligation, often referred to as the AR obligation. This concerns extended producer responsibility, also known as EPR obligations in Europe. Extended producer responsibility means that manufacturers, retailers, or importers are responsible for the entire life cycle of their products and packaging, including registration, data reporting, and participation in recycling systems. In many EU countries, this responsibility is fulfilled via national systems. An authorized representative or EPR representative is an external person or company that ensures compliance with all local EPR obligations on behalf of the company, such as registrations with authorities, quantity reporting, or communication with national systems. For companies without a local establishment in an EU country, appointing such a representative has so far often been mandatory. Status as of December 2025. Proposal to suspend the AR obligation. In December 2025, the European Commission presented an important proposal. It aims to suspend the obligation to appoint an EPR authorized representative for EU-based companies until 2035. This would mean if your company is established in the EU, for example, a German online shop headquartered in Germany, you would no longer have to appoint authorized representatives in other EU countries, even if you sell packaged products there. This potential suspension would affect several areas, including packaging under the new PPWR, electrical and electronic equipment, also known as W3E, batteries, and single-use plastics and general waste. Important, this proposal is not yet legally binding. It still needs to be adopted by the European Parliament and the Council of the EU. Until then, the existing rules continue to apply. What this means for 2026? First, EPR obligations themselves remain in place, including registration, reporting, and participation in national systems. A suspension of the authorized representative obligation does not change this. Second, until a final decision is made, you should continue to assume that the AR obligation for EU-based companies will apply as planned from August 2026. This means that if you sell packaged products in other EU countries without having a local establishment, you would still need to appoint authorized representatives. And third, if the proposal is later adopted, the obligation could be suspended for EU-based companies until 2035. This would significantly reduce organizational and administrative burdens, but only if the legislation is actually adopted in this form. Who is not covered by the suspension? One crucial point, the planned suspension applies only to companies established in the EU. Manufacturers or retailers from third countries, like outside the EU, would still be required to appoint authorized representatives where this is required by law. Summary for 2026. For now, continue to prepare for the AR obligation as it is uncertain whether and when it will be suspended. PPWR obligations, including EPR responsibilities, will apply as planned from August 2026 unless the proposal is adopted in time. The proposed suspension until 2035 could bring significant simplification, but it has not yet been adopted and should therefore not mark the end of your compliance planning. Let's have a look at what changes in 2026 for textile EPR in Spain and Italy. 2026 will be a decisive year for online retailers in the textile sector, as both Spain and Italy will introduce their national textile EPR systems. This means that textiles and footwear will, for the first time, be systematically covered by extended producer responsibility in these two major EU markets. Let's start with Spain and the launch of the textile EPR system in 2026. Spain plans to introduce its textile EPR system during the course of 2026. The legal basis is a government draft from June 2025, which is currently in the legislative process. Adoption is expected in 2026. Once the relevant decree is published in the Spanish official gazette, the system will enter into force immediately. From that point, very short deadlines apply. Manufacturers and online retailers have 3 months to register in the Spanish producer register, Registro de Productores de Productos, and then have only 1 additional month to provide proof of membership in a producer responsibility organization, a so-called SCRAP. EPR obligations apply not only to companies established in Spain, but also to foreign online retailers selling directly to end consumers in Spain via distance selling. This explicitly includes retailers from other EU countries. Obligations include registration in the producer register, annual quantity reporting by units and weight, declaration of product categories based on CN codes, and payment of EPR fees. A special feature in Spain is that EPR fees must be shown separately on invoices. They may not be simply hidden in the product price. This transparency obligation clearly distinguishes Spain from other countries. Now let's take a look at Italy, where the Textile EPR system is also expected to be introduced in 2026, according to current information as early as the first quarter of 2026. This was officially announced by the Italian Ministry of the Environment in October 2025. A corresponding draft law has already been published and subjected to public consultation. At the beginning of 2026, the text is in the final coordination phase between the responsible ministries. The introduction is considered ambitious but realistic. The planned scope in Italy is particularly broad. It includes clothing, footwear, leather goods, home textiles and mattresses, a product group that is not part of Textile EPR in all countries. Here too, online retailers without a registered office in Italy who sell textiles directly to Italian end consumers are considered producers and are therefore subject to EPR obligations. The specific deadlines for registration, reporting and fee payments will be published with the final decree. What is already clear, however, is that registration will be mandatory before or very shortly after market entry, and retailers will need to join an approved producer responsibility organization. So what does this mean in concrete terms for 2026? 2026 is not a transitional year for Textile EPR in Spain and Italy, but the operational launch year of the systems. For online retailers, this means anyone selling textiles or footwear to Spain or Italy in 2026 must prepare for new registration and reporting obligations. The preparation period after the laws enter into force is short, particularly in Spain. Sales data, product weights and CN codes should be cleanly available by 2026 at the latest. And EPR compliance is increasingly being checked by marketplaces and fulfillment service providers. Missing registration can lead to sales suspensions. 2026 therefore marks the starting point for Textile EPR in Spain and Italy. Both countries are thus among the front runners within the EU, even ahead of the EU-wide obligation from 2028. Those who prepare early not only avoid deadline stress and sanctions, but can also integrate the new requirements into existing processes in a structured and predictable way. So what's going on with furniture EPR in Portugal? From January 1st, 2026, Portugal plans to introduce an EPR obligation for furniture and mattresses. However, it is important to note that the relevant legislation has not yet been finally adopted and the concrete design of the processes is still under development. Currently, the political direction has been set, but details on registration, reporting, fee structures and operational processes are not yet final. For retailers, this means fully binding registration specifically for furniture EPR is not yet conclusively possible. What is already possible? Retailers can be recorded in a preparatory manner, for example as part of existing packaging registrations. Through this, an authorized representative or AR can already be appointed who can later also take on furniture EPR obligations once the system is fully defined. For 2026, this means in concrete terms, Portugal is actively working on the introduction of furniture EPR. The exact process is still being defined, and retailers should prepare early but remain flexible. Once binding information is published, it will be implemented accordingly. And finally, back to Italy, new developments regarding the EPR number on Amazon. While foreign retailers without an establishment in Italy are not legally required to join a take-back system, the situation changes fundamentally for marketplace sellers. Amazon has introduced its own compliance deadline for all sellers on Amazon.it. March 31st, 2026. If you do not provide an EPR registration number from a take-back system, you will automatically be enrolled in the EPR Pay on Behalf service from the following cycle. Micro-enterprises selling packaging products are exempt from this obligation. A micro-enterprise is defined as a company with fewer than 10 employees and an annual turnover or balance sheet total of no more than 2 million euros. Proof must be provided via a Chamber of Commerce extract. Alright, let's get to the conclusion. Wow, 2026 will not be a year in which EPR and environmental compliance can simply run in the background. The PPWR becomes binding, new EPR systems are launched in multiple countries, existing obligations are tightened, and marketplaces like Amazon are tightening the screws even further. For online retailers, this means preparation is no longer a nice to have, but a prerequisite for continuous sales. The good news is that those who use 2026 to build structures, cleanly capture data, and clearly define responsibilities will not only gain legal certainty, but also peace of mind for the years ahead. Many requirements will only fully apply later, but the foundations are being laid now. Our advice is therefore clear: closely monitor developments, do not wait until the last deadline, and seek support early if things become complex. We are of course happy to help you with all of these topics. In the video description you will find a link to all our services, as well as a contact form through which you can ask questions free of charge and without any obligation. This way you stay capable of acting, avoid unpleasant surprises, and can focus on what really matters: your business. And now you can catch your breath again. We've made it. If you want to stay up to date with what's happening with PPWR & Co., subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your loyalty in 2025, and we wish you a successful 2026. See you soon.